Hello, I'm Ron, and today is October 1st, 1999. I've been asked if I would do this tape on our system of justice. It's quite important to a lot of people, and I've elected to do so because of basically one factor. It concerns me and hurts me deeply to see anyone voluntarily giving up their rights. That's so important because so many people have fought and died for these rights. And people really don't knowingly give them up, don't waive their rights. It's done by sleight of hand, by instruction, by telling them to sign here. And then I see what happens to them after they've cooperated in that nature and the trouble that they've gotten into and the waiver of their rights. And that hurts because I'm a constitutionalist. I believe in that document and I adhere to it to the best of my ability. And everyone in this country should, especially those that take an oath of office to uphold it. But remember this, even though they've taken an oath, you can still waive all those rights. And the waiver is done a number of ways, and most people are tricked and don't even know how come they didn't receive justice. So we have this system, and I'm going to start out by giving you a claimer and a disclaimer. The claim is I'm going to tell you the truth as I know it and as I have lived it. Now, I'm not going to tell you anything that isn't so. And once this tape is done, I will be the first to review it. And if my mind and my mouth were not in sync and I made a misstatement, it will be corrected before you get to see the tape, because I want you to at least get it direct from me without mistake what the truth is as I know it. Okay, so that's my pledge to you. Secondly, the disclaimer is I'm not deemed by the system of justice to be learned in the law. So I want you to know that. And also this is no attempt to practice law. This is an attempt to convey to you what I do know, which may, if it's used correctly, save you much pain and suffering and disgrace. You see, I won't accept any monetary remuneration or enumeration from this tape. I do, though, possess an interest that you not make mistakes that I've made in the past in the learning process. I am interested in that you preserve your constitutional rights always and in all cases, because it is so beneficial to you. Our forefathers had the same problem back in 1774 as we've got now. And it was written down then. And I am putting it on this tape now that the problem's the same. And it's basically this. Under the Declaration of Rights of 1774, the patriots at that time, those that wanted to fight for the rights in this country that they came here to obtain and to keep, were preserved. And there was quite an understanding that foreigners were curtailing those rights, harassing the people, eking out their substance, and imprisoning them. on purported laws in which they had nothing to say about, nothing to do with. And so I want to read this to you because it is so important, because it now exists today. Then of old, it was by the British Parliament. Today, it has been allowed to come back and exist because of our own negligence as citizens of this country. Now, I can't correct all the wrongs of all the citizens, and some of the mistakes I've made I can't correct. But I do possess a certain level of knowledge now that can prevent many of those mistakes from being made. And so I'm going to share this with you on that basis. Lastly, on this issue of claimer and disclaimer, I'm going to tell you this, that this is tape number 18. Now, I have viewed the 17 prior tapes. I did those to the best of my ability, like I'm going to do this one. But I also want you to know that after viewing them, I've felt that they are deficient, because there are things that I should have said in addition that may make things clearer for you. There are things that I could have gotten into more detail on, so that probably they could have been used more efficiently by you. And for those, I feel bad about. But I'm going to do the best I can getting this across to you. And, you know, now it'll be deficient. And you know what? I like to hear the comments from those of you that view tapes. Comments, of course you always enjoy the comments that say that are favorable. But I also am interested in the comments that are not. Because you can't improve without criticism. And as long as it's made on a constructive basis, I will, I will recognize the shortfall and apologize for it and attempt to do better in the future. And so, tape number 18 is here now, about to start. The British Parliament claiming, you know what I mean? Just claiming now. A power of right to bind the people of America by statute in all cases whatsoever, hath in some acts expressly imposed taxes on them, and in others under various pretenses, but in fact for the purpose of raising a revenue, has established a board of commissioners with unconstitutional powers, and established the jurisdiction of courts of admiralty, not only for the collecting of said duties, but for the trial of causes merely arising within the body of a county. And whereas in consequence of other statutes, judges who before held estates at will in their offices have been made dependent on the crown alone for their salaries. And of course behind that is the enforcement. Here it was standing armies kept in time of peace. Today we have all of that, but the British Parliament. The Admiralty Maritime Jurisdiction is there, i.e. the law of contract. And what's it all there for? Number one, uno, the purpose of raising a revenue. Now, I have been subjected to criminal process in the state of Minnesota, state of North Dakota, and under federal jurisdiction as well. Not only criminal process, but civil process in numerous states. Now, the system that we have is most of all there for the purpose of settling disputes. So we do have a system of justice for the purpose of settling disputes. How are they settled? Who benefits the most? That's the important factor. Right now, as I'm talking to you, the government is by far the largest winner in the courtroom. By far. No one else is a close second. So we have a system of to handle disputes called a justice system, which handles disputes for the purpose that benefits the government the most. It also generates the most revenue for the government. Yeah. Well, if they're going to do this and continue to do it, and I have every belief that they're going to continue to do it, we as citizens got to learn how to protect ourselves from these abuses of the most basic law of this land. And of course, the place we start is with ourselves. Go right to the mirror and look at the person that's going to protect these rights. That is so important. Because if you give them up, remember this, the raising of the revenue is the most important factor for the government. The most important factor. They don't care whether you're safe. They don't care whether you get justice. They don't care whether you get a defense. They'll do what is necessary to win, because there's money in it. One, they can get it out of your pocket. Two, they can get it out of the taxpayer's pocket. They have to have an excuse to get it out of the taxpayer's pocket, because those are all trust funds. And so they got to have bodies. And we got to put them in controlled environment. It's gotten such big business that we have the most people incarcerated per capita as any country in the world. We're number one. Now, weren't we told when we were in school about these rights we had? Then how can this happen to innocent folks? Now, I haven't been in all the facilities of controlled environment in this country, but I've talked to a lot of people that have been in other facilities, and in the ones that I was in, the job was to be sure that you made it the shortest time possible. Sometimes you can't squeak through the process because it is so intense. And I want to tell you, they will lie, cheat, and steal without batting an eye, without giving you a clue, because the purpose is for raising a revenue. And they'll do whatever it takes to keep their numbers up, the incarcerations up. Now, that's kind of an indictment of our enforcement officers and our judicial system. But you've got one direction to go, and that's up in protecting yourself. Because right now you got a 98% chance of losing if you're ever brought into court on anything. 98% chance of losing. This happens way too often because someone feels threatened, feels they're required absolutely to cooperate. And I don't know, but a lot of that cooperation and that threatened part don't fit into this contract, this Constitution. It's your job to stand up for it. You see, in this country, we got all kinds of laws. We got 20,000 laws just covering guns right now. Just guns. Well, but we got the Second Amendment here. You know, it's just one little paragraph. It is straightforward and simple. How would you deprive yourself of that one? Take out the pen and enter another contract, and you will buy the 20,000 laws. It's that contract that transfers the jurisdiction from your constitutional rights to those regulations. And you will have done it to yourself, thinking that you're required to. Now, here's how you're required to behave. And this document was written off of the most basic law of the world. All of that law that's disclosed in the Bible. Because all the natural law is there. Anyone that's ever read from beginning to the end of the Bible knows it, knows that it's there. This was taken from that, so that it would fit English, and it was numbered different so that it would fit you much more easily than going through the big thick book to dig it out. Okay? That is the supreme law of the land, and all officials, before they commence office, must take the oath of office before they commence the office. We have gotten so we're down to very few officials are taking the oath of office. Not because they're not required to. We're not making them. Remember, now this is our contract with the government. If we don't make the employee follow the contract, whose fault is it? Ours, ours, and ours. Nobody else's. So we got to do it. This is our country. This is our laws. They're required to uphold them, and penalties for violating them once they've taken that oath is serious now. Those are serious penalties. But if they haven't taken the oath, they don't have to. Now, the justice system. Right now, it is so imperfect that jails are filled with innocent people. Now, even if you were a guilty person, you have the protection in this law. It's not your job to waive your rights. It's not your job to contract away your rights under this. So why do it? You see, the system is quite clear in here. If you're going to be found guilty of something, they got to prove it. And they got to prove it beyond a reasonable doubt. So it's not your job to make it easy for them, it's their job to prove it. Well, in the process of proving it, you know, that gets to be work. And a lot of those folks ain't accustomed to working very hard. They're also not accustomed to following the rules. You know, the rules are kind of important. You know, there's rules that's been laid down for these courts. And they're all supposed to follow them. Well, you know, in my career, you know, I'd like to tell you one little story. And I've gotten, you know, so I kind of think that a lot of the legal process that's in our community is a farce. And so, of course, I give judges nicknames and so on and so forth because it brings their name up current and fast and all of that. But there's a judge over here, I call him Sidetrack Leclerc. Never faced the issue, always waltz you off onto a dead-end sidetrack. One day I was before him and I was fighting for my cause, you know. And he could see that and he said, "But, Ron, you don't know the rules. You got to follow the rules." Oh, yeah. Well, you know, I mean, this ain't the first book that I got with the rules. But back then, I got the first book. because I wanted to read the rules and I wanted to follow the rules. You see, up till then I thought common sense always prevailed in the courtroom, and that justice always prevailed in the courtroom, and that certainly common sense and justice would be afforded me because I hadn't broken any law that I knew of. Well, so I get the rules, and boy, I'm starting to follow the rules now. And you know, it was the very next time I was in the courtroom before the same judge. And I said, but Judge, this is the rule. And I read it into the record. Well, yeah, he said. That may be the rule, but that ain't the way it is. Now, you see, I'm starting to get a little education here. They apply the rules for you. They don't apply them for themselves. That's your job to see to it they follow the rules. And there's lots of avenues for that. There are investigation organizations for attorneys and judges, inquiry committees, and judicial conduct committees to take a look at these things. They're not too effective. They're more or less the chickens are being guarded by the fox. But when the file gets so thick and they run across something that can't be covered up, they'll move on a judge or on an attorney to disbar the attorney and remove the judge from the bench. And so we have to do our due diligence to catch them at violating their oath of office and their job. And see to it that those complaints get in, because once they get so thick, person's gone. So we got to kind of clean up, you know. If you've ever employed someone and you terminated them, you always terminated them for a good reason. And we got to terminate some of these that we've elected and appointed and so on and so forth, because they don't fit the bill. They won't comply with the law. And that's for everyone. There's no one above the law. So, remember now, the system of handling the criminal process in this country is #1 for the purpose of raising a revenue. And it does extremely well. And at the same time, it settles the dispute. And 98% of the time, it will be settled against you and your wishes. So, with that deck being stacked as it is, then it is for us to work our way through and prevail. Now, I have been in municipal courts, county courts, district courts. This is of this, you know, town and county and district and the state. I have been in the appellate court, in the Supreme Court of this state and other states. I have been in federal court, Court of Appeals, from the Federal District Court to the Court of Appeals. I've been there numerous times in different states. And I have made numerous attempts to petition for writ of certiorari to the United States Supreme Court. And I can absolutely say that the United States Supreme Court is not going to hear at any time in now or in the near future any agricultural issues. And so I guess that's been a waste of paperwork. But the learning how to prepare and so forth is part of the process. You see, you can't feel free if you don't know how to exercise your rights under the law. And the number one rule that goes along with that is you never, ever, at any time, pick up a pen and sign the contract they slide under there for you to sign. Because if it requires a signature of yours, it absolutely is a contract. No ands, no ifs, or no buts about it. This is it. Most people do themselves in because of this. And let's just take criminal process at the very, very beginning of it. A police officer, let's just take that, any officer that wears a badge or purports to, makes an arrest. Well, you don't have to. And by the way, just stopping on the highway is an arrest. He may let you go again, but it's an arrest when he turns on the bubble machine. Instantly when that comes on, that's an arrest. You may not be in chains, you may not be in a controlled environment yet, but you're under arrest as soon as that light comes on. Now, what's he looking for? Most cases, he's looking for you to take out the old pen and sign your own summons and complaint. Yeah. Yeah. Now we got a summons and complaint. Well, as much as I've been in litigation, this is my belief. I believe that all criminal process starts out with civil process. I believe it all starts out civilly and under the civil rules. Then I believe it's converted to criminal process after the person waives his right to the preliminary proceedings to discuss any violations of law. What law have you violated? What law? What high law have you violated? Probably none, unless there's an injured party. But nevertheless, what's he after? Purpose of raising a revenue and to get your acceptance. Well, gee, if I didn't sign the ticket, he's able to put me in jail. What? You live in this country. You're operating out there on the road. You probably got a driver's license and you probably got your car registered with the state, making the car the state's property. You just happen to be in possession temporarily. Well, you see, you've already done some contracting that puts you in a position where you feel, well, gee, you know, if I don't give him the signature now, you'll put me in jail. Just go. Let's go, I guess. Not much else we can do here. Because you got a lot of constitutional rights to assert. And you can't assert them with a bonehead that doesn't know anything about constitutional law. He's out there for only one purpose. And I mean, I stress that. The purpose of raising a revenue. And that's what he's fixing to do with your cooperation. Without your cooperation, it ain't so easy. And they're not accustomed to working, but only at 10% of the time they're on duty. You know. Not very long ago, about 2 months ago, you know, sitting right where you are right now, an attorney that's been in the practice of law for more than 20 years, so sitting there, who is interested in running for a judgeship in this district, said that when he's seen over the period of years that an officer's report from wherever can only be viewed as a pack of lies. Well, you know, that's kind of refreshing. I mean, been in the legal process that long and starts to recognize that they use a bunch of bullshit for the purpose of raising a revenue. Also exercise control under those contracts that you've already signed, waiving rights to travel and all of those other things. You know, when it converts from civil process to criminal process, when you enter the contract for the criminal jurisdiction, that's my personal opinion, based on what I've seen. Remember, all process, in my opinion, commences civilly and is converted to criminal process pursuant to contract, whether it be by the pen or you standing at the podium and entering a plea of guilty or not guilty. That's the contract for the criminal jurisdiction, in my opinion. And at that point in time where you enter a plea, you will have waived all your rights to discuss the law, to find what basic law have you violated. Probably none. But you must have, because you know what? You're full of perception. Perception. Now, if you take a person that knows nothing, and this person that knows nothing would view this tape, they would have their first exposure to what the judicial system is. And they'd grasp it, a higher degree of it, and real fast, because they've got no perceptions to go along with it. What happens now, and from you listening to this, is you're already going to be full of perceptions that you started getting in kindergarten, or the grades, high school, or college. These have been drilled into you, that we have a government here that's here to protect the people, to keep law and order, that they are here for your protection and to serve you. Now, you're already full of those perceptions. You're also full of the perception that you're going to get justice in the system, whether you're guilty or not guilty. Well, so we got to start out with that perception. Now, if I could reach right into your mind with this hand and take that out and throw it away, if I could get it all now and throw it away, you'd be a tough son of a gun to beat in the courtroom. Because it's perceptions that they have learned how to do a dog and pony show to get you to waive one right after another. Remember, it requires you to waive them. Are you scared? Oh, this matter is not big enough for me to raise a fuss over defending myself and protecting my constitutional rights. Oh? Why do you think we got the problem we got? Because most people perceive, I'll waive my rights and pay and just get out of here. Well, you get a special mark with their pen, knowing that you're a soft touch and you're subject to being snapped again and again and again and again. And each time the situation gets a little worse. It costs a little more money for the purpose of raising a revenue. You know, we're in Fargo right now. We have a car theft ring in Fargo. It's surprising if the city council, you know, they're involved. Every person that wears a badge in this town is involved in the theft of cars. And they're fixing to hold an auction. You ought to see how much success they've had in theft. Well, citizens don't take them to task, and so they're getting away with car theft. None of these owners have been contacted prior to the taking. They've just been taken. Now they're going to be sold. There's two ways you can stop that. One is not buy any of them. And the other is, if one of those vehicles are yours, fight like hell to keep it. Whole snub them up to the law. Because it's quite clear under the law when you read it. The owner had to be given notice and an opportunity to fix the defect. That's for the public's interest. But they don't bother with that. They're in the business of stealing cars. And they do very well at it. Now, when you get to looking at the system and how good it is, and remember now, nobody on this face of this earth is absolutely without sin and does everything in their life correctly. I mean, that's a given. But it gets pretty bad in your county when the sheriff's son runs around and does drug raids and collects the drugs, and the sheriff's another son traffics in it, puts it out in the market. Yeah, that happens in this town. And across the river we got another bunch of thugs. 3 of them came from L.A. They were fired out there. What do they do with an officer that is no good, that's deemed to be corrupt and not fit for service? They move him to another area. He gets a job in another place. Why? Because the game is to raise the revenue. Remember I said 2 ways. One, get the money right out of your pocket. The other is to be able to dun the taxpayers for your keep. But it's all about money, because they don't care whether you live or die. Whether you're injured, stole from, oftentimes you will find they're the ones doing the stealing, under the immunity of a badge. Now that's our real system, and they start the system. And I get a kick out of reading police reports. You know, some people read comic books. I like to read police reports. You know why I like to read them? Oftentimes, they're not signed by the officer that put down these facts. You know, I mean, we got this contract here. You know, it's called the 4th Amendment. My land sakes now, I'll tell you. The right of the people to be secure in their persons, houses, papers, and effects against unreasonable searches and seizures shall not be violated. Now, is there any question about that? It says, shall not be violated. Now I realize the English language is a flexible language, that words mean many different things at different times and in different contexts. But this is pretty clear. And that no warrant shall issue but upon probable cause, supported by oath or affirmation. Where's the sworn statement as to a crime being committed? Under penalties of perjury, this sworn statement, where is it? Don't even exist. Why not? Probably because these officials have not taken the oath of office. But if they have, there's cause against the official. What are you doing feeding people into this thing? That's not what we intended. That's not protecting anybody. It's making all the law-abiding citizens subject to rape and pillage and incarceration if they just don't voluntarily give up their money or their property. Well, that's not this country. I mean, we had that once. And we got it again. Although we got some basic tools to work with now, they had nothing but paper and pen at that time to try to produce something that they could live under. That's all well established. But you know, it's our job to keep this republic free. Nobody else's. Ours. And as long as we put up with this, it's going to go on. When each starts standing up for their rights and running the process all the way through. All the way through. When I say all the way through, I mean all the way through. The highest court you can go to. Well, many people say, but I don't know how to do that. Well, you didn't get an education in school as to what was right and how to do that. You know, you're alive. You possess some abilities. You possess some common sense. Never too late to learn. And we, the people, need each of us to stand up for what's right. And that puts an end to this crap. You know why? Because it takes more revenue than they've collected to prosecute it. So all the frivolous stuff has to go. Well, then we're back to prosecuting just those that are really criminals, if we can prove it, which is what our system is supposed to have been all along. I don't want a very dangerous man that's dangerous, or lady, that's dangerous to this society, running around loose. Everybody knows that. Nobody wants that. But under the guise of that, we're filling the prisons with innocent people. One of the facilities I was in, I'm telling you, based on my little knowledge of the law, 90% of them were there, had absolutely no business being there. They had pled guilty, the majority of those 90%, just to get the government off their back. Shame, shame, shame. Shame on government and the prosecutors. Shame for lying, prosecuting a crime that didn't exist. But shame for that inmate who didn't assert his rights. Yeah, rights. The preliminary process is so important. Many people don't know what a Frank's hearing is. Frank's hearing is one of the first things should ever be handled in any criminal process. Whether you deem it to start out civil or criminal, it's irrelevant. Franks versus Delaware is the famed case. It basically says this: you want a right to review the nature and cause of the offense with the person who's did the affirmation, you know, the sworn statement saying you've done something wrong. You want to get him on the stand, you want to question him. Because you can take his report, which you can get under the Brady Act and under the Jinx Act. You can get that report, and you can question him as to the accuracy of all of this alleged claim. And if you can find him lying at a Frank's hearing, out she goes into the trash barrel, and you go down the street. So we ain't even gotten to ask the questions of law yet. We're just checking on the person who said there was probable cause, truth, under oath. I mean, you can't bring false charges against people in this country. It's unlawful, unless the victim allows it. Look in the mirror now who the potential victim is. I also want you to know that we're a nation of laws, and there's nobody in this country that possesses all the knowledge in the law. Not because we have so many. And so you got to reduce your knowledge in order to cover yourself and protect yourself right to this contract and how to administer your rights just under it. And you'll be okay. Don't pick up on these other perceptions, because they ain't for you. They're for them. Well, I mentioned the Brady's Act and the Jinx Act. A lot of the state rules and operations of law are patterned after the federal operations. All of the state judges have to follow the rules laid down by the United States Supreme Court as far as rules are concerned. And so we have but one court in this country, and that's the United States Supreme Court, and then such inferior courts. All the rest are inferior from that one. So they must all subscribe to those rules, and consequently, That's the rules of judicial conduct I'm talking about. And also now we've got the federal rules of civil and criminal procedure. And I got those books here. They're kind of old, but I don't change the rules all that much as time goes on. So I see I have the civil rules, federal civil rules of procedure here, and I have the federal criminal rules. And I see I had to have these books because I needed to use them. Follow the rules. But I'll tell you this, what is in the federal civil and criminal rules you can find in the state rules. It exists. And I'll get into that a little bit later here, because from the entry of a sentence, you have all the preliminary stuff that you need to do. And one of the most important ones under the Brady Act and the Jinx Act is to get full discovery. I get a kick out of getting full discovery because they're not accustomed to being asked for full discovery. I mean, I want it all, including oath of office. Who is bonding them? Who's placing the surety for these people that's moving this process? Because I may end up being injured in this deal, and I want to know where to collect. Well, most of them, and I'm telling you, most of them that's doing this now, have seen to it that they don't have a pot to piss in or a window to throw it out of. They're judgment proof. Any assets that are in some trusts or in another family member's name. So if you go after collecting them for a wrongdoing, you may get a judgment, but if you left the ink off the judgment, you could use it for toilet paper. Because they don't have anything personally in their name. Okay? That's kind of they run that. That's modus operandi. And then, you know, the court wants to be sure it's got jurisdiction. Well, any day is a good day for a motion to dismiss, based on the facts supported by your affidavit. Any day is a good day. Any hour is a good hour to make the motion, in writing or verbally. You can't make too many motions to dismiss. It's not possible. Why not ask? I know, I've had people tell me they should have dismissed the case, it was frivolous. Yeah, but did you ask them to? Well, no. Did you support your request with an oath statement yourself as to the truth? Yeah. Remember, you can use this to sign the pleadings that you prepare. Only the ones you prepare. You sign one document of theirs, and I guarantee you, you waived certain rights. I saw a fellow just yesterday. Classic. Absolute classic. The court said, go see the shrink over here. Yeah, well, you see, the government has committed a crime against these people. The government does that, you know. Just in case you didn't know that, the government does that. They create small crimes and they create bigger crimes. Check all of the information available on Ruby Ridge, Waco, Oklahoma City, Flight 800. You'll know exactly what I'm talking about if you gather all the evidence on that, including the videos that exist. You'll know what I'm talking about. But they commit these minor criminal acts too. And when they do, you gotta know when they've committed a crime, because they got a whole bunch of staff that they can draw from. These are all the suckies. They sucky off the taxpayers' money to help cover up the crime. And of course, one of the ones they use in the final analysis will be what I call a shrinky. You know what a shrink is. And the shrink will make the determination based on what he's told to do. No ands, ifs, or buts about it. Well, this fellow needed to be interviewed because the court says be there. So he was there. But they said, you got to sign your name here, releasing us from liability under the Privacy Act. Oh, the hell you don't say. Yeah, you got to do this, or else. Well, you see, it appeared the judge ordered him to be there and be in the interview. Well, he was there. That's all he was ordered to do, was be there. And he was there. He wasn't ordered to sign away his constitutional right to privacy. Yeah. You see, they obfuscate the truth. So he was there, and the shrink couldn't do nothing without the release from him. Consequently, he signed the release under the Privacy Act. So the shrink could write then and sign what this defendant had authorized him to do. He wasn't paying for it. Now, you know one thing? If you ain't paying for it and ain't going to be for you, the government's caught in a crime, they got to cover it up, they're the one paying the shrink. What do you think the opinion's going to be? I'll tell you what it was. I read it with my own eyes. The shrink determined that the man was not fit to have his children at home, to cover up the crime of kidnapping and transporting them in interstate commerce to another state. Federal offense on top of it all. I got a kick out of his statement when he said, "Isn't there anybody in that system that's on my side?" And I said, "Well, I don't know. But have you found any yet?" He said, "No. Every one of them's against me." Now, you see, if you go into a process with that view, that he's had to learn the hard way, then you'll know what I'm trying to tell you. They ain't there for your benefit. They're there for the purpose of raising a revenue, and oftentimes in that process, they commit crimes, and then they ask you to let them off the hook, you know, with the trusty pen. Luckily for this fellow, he has a marriage contract with his wife. She ain't been interviewed yet. I don't know what they intend to do. But if they continue to volunteer like they have for the last year and 1 month, they will not be ever in possession of their children. And they love their children. And their children have all written requests that they come home. They want to be home. Now, you know, once in a while I look in the statute. I wanted to see, you know, if perhaps when they took these kids out of school and took them away from mom and dad, if there was some clause under state statute for that. And I looked and I looked, and I came across where we deal with abuse, you know. That's be the only thing that'd be in the public's interest, abuse. Well, I said, do any of your kids have any lasting marks on them? Any broken bones? Any disfigurement? No. Then what sparked this? Well, my son got pissed off at me because I gave him a paddling one night on the butt. Huh. I said, we don't have enough of that in this country. Soon enough, and some of these youngsters. A little discipline. I mean, I was disciplined by my dad, right on the fanny, more than once. I didn't like it, but I had also done wrong. You know, kids will do that. They'll get out of hand. So, that's not a crime under North Dakota law. It just ain't. So we got a kidnapping there. And I think that's such a shame. Because these parents are just sick about it. And they've gotten 3 signatures out of this gentleman so far. And that's just like laying dominoes. to the full. You know, I can't advise anybody what to do. All I can do is say, this is what I'd do if it was me. But it ain't my deal. And I'm not learned in the law, and I'm not so-called authorized. So I don't. But it is important that you understand the process. And you got to know right up front whether you're being conned or not. And in most cases you are, and if you believe you are, you're going to be right way more times than you're ever going to be wrong. So we want to look at this just us process. See, justice can be spelt more than one way. Just us or justice. And I swear it's just the just us system. And that's why we've entitled this tape this way. Now, once you get through the full discovery, and you know, I like very much for the other side not to furnish much. And people get so upset when they've made all of these requests under Brady and under the Jinx Act. You know, it's under Rule 16 of the Federal Rule. And under Title 18, 3500 of the United States Code. I mean, it's all there. You're entitled to everything. And I don't care if they furnish a damn thing. Excuse my English. Because they ain't going to use it at trial. Because I make specific demands, what I want. And I don't care if they furnish it or not. But if they don't furnish it to me timely, they ain't going to use it at trial, because in will go the objection. Now, how can you make a judge do exactly what you want him to do? Well, one, you got to apply. But he may not do exactly what you want to do. You have no way to compel him right at that point to do exactly what you want him to do. But you have one right that he can't deny, and that's the right to make the record. Not just in the clerk's file, but in the courtroom between you and the court reporter. You are entitled to a record. Absolute, unconditional, depending on whether you can afford to pay for it or not. There's process to handle all of that. You're entitled to the record. And it's your job to make the record. Because you can't make a judge do anything. But when he sees you've made the record, you have the best chance to get justice. When he sees you haven't made the record, he knows what your chances of appeal are. Slim to none. With slim being the highest number. So then he can do whatever he wants to do. But you see, you gotta make the record. Yeah, see to it. File it. Be sure you swear to what the truth is. Be sure it's a record. But you prepare the documents. You don't let nobody else prepare that stuff, because it won't be the truth. And you will be waiving your rights. The most dangerous instrument known to man in this country is the pen. The second most dangerous instrument is the mouth. Can't keep the mouth shut. Running the process the full tilt. Getting all the transcripts as you go along, and so on and so forth. Running it through the appeal process, both the appellate and the Supreme Court of the state, if it's a state issue, or running it through the circuit court and the federal, you know, and even certiorari to the U.S. Supreme Court, is running it the whole way. You make these people that are breaking the law and making life miserable for you run the full marathon. You know what will happen after a bit? They'll use their pen and there'll be a mark by your name. Don't mess with this person. It don't pay. Now, what can I say? You're starting to enforce these. When it no longer pays to break your constitutional rights, you've got them. Just see to it you don't ever injure another person. You know, it's kind of simple, you know. Don't drive when you're incapacitated. Don't drop something on somebody. Don't run into anybody. I mean, just don't hurt nobody physically. Period. And that's a lot easier. Not only that, when this becomes your law library, you can carry it with you wherever you go, just in case you forgot something. You know, I like the Fifth Amendment. You know, I have seen so many people in the can who are never even charged with a crime. Are you hearing me? Never charged with a criminal offense. And I found that that can happen in two ways. One, they didn't even look in the book to find out whether it was a criminal statute or not. That was listed on a document called indictment. Or were never indicted by a grand jury. No probable cause sworn to as to why, you know, supporting that a person should be tried for this. None. None. Now, you might be able to excuse it if somebody was deemed not to be very intelligent, actually very unintelligent. And you might be able to excuse it to some degree that he was scared and that he was losing everything, all of his privileges and immunities, his property, his family. He was losing everything. You might be able to excuse it. I can't excuse it, because I know how important this Constitution is. But when you find some of the smartest people that live in this country locked up, not for committing any crime whatsoever, and having pled guilty just to get the government off their back, there is no way in my heart can I ever find a way to forget that and the stupidity of it. And when they get to the law library, and these facilities have them, or you can get the books brought in. They don't have the facilities. And some of the smartest people in this country find out that they weren't even charged with a crime. You ain't never seen a mad person before until you've seen that. And imagine putting out $500,000 for a defense and not getting one. You can't buy a defense. I don't care how much money you got. Don't count on getting a defense. They'll take the money. So they can't be bought. Now, they're officers of the court. They have some value if you know how to manage them. It's just like managing an employee. If you can manage them, they have some value. Might be able to help you on the rules of evidence. You know, might be able to help you during trial. Might be able to help you on a few things. But I'm telling you, predominantly what happens when people hire lawyers is they drop their burden on him, and he doesn't intend on doing anything but take your money. That profession produces very little of value. Not nothing of value, but very little of value clean across this economy. It lives off it. It sucks blood out of it. Responsibility is not his or hers, it's yours. But I'm not equipped. Well, you can be not equipped completely and do a better job. I met a gentleman, very successful businessman, still is a successful businessman, who paid $80,000 for a lawyer on a little simple case. And the lawyer showed up one time for half an hour and convinced him to plead guilty. Yeah. wasn't even charged with a criminal statute of the law. Can you imagine the insult to this gentleman when he found out? I was got to be the happy person to tell him. He turned instantly beet red and mad. Don't be a fool. I got a kick out of this. Public defender. A public defender is got to be what I classify the most worthless person on the face of the earth. You can be a freeloader, do not a day's work in the rest of your life, and if you're not a public defender, you are of more value. The public defender's job is pursuant to contract. They sign a contract with the judge and the prosecutor that makes them a public defender. And of course the person realizes that, well, now, this is my public defender. The government's seeing to it that I get a defense. Wrong. Wrong, wrong, wrong. The government wants to see to it has jurisdiction pursuant to contract. And you will be fed right on in there without a defense. The government's not interested in you having a defense. It's interested in being sure that it has jurisdiction and that you have waived your rights. And anything you tell a public defender will go to the prosecutor almost instantly. You will find that you don't have a defense. Those people, I call them bar flies. If you've ever been to a saloon and you see some beer spilt on the bar and you see some flies hanging around there sucking up the sauce, that's what we got. A group of low-grade lawyers that are public defenders purely for the purpose of feeding you into the system by waiving your rights and seeing to it that the court gets jurisdiction. Yeah. Now, if you don't think I know what I'm talking about in this, I want you to go to one of these steam thrasher shows. You hear me? They got them here. You know, Rolog is a very fine one. They got them all over the country, but Rolog, and we got New Rockford, North Dakota, and those are the closest ones and the ones that I go to. And I go there because I want to see the justice system work. It is so simplified when you watch the thrashing machine. You know, they come up with bundle racks, you know. It's got this little sheaves of grain tied together, you know. And of course the tails of the grain are at one end and the heads of the grain are at the other end. And I liken that to the judicial system. Up at the beginning there we got a steamer. And that's producing the power. Now that's the judge. You hear me? The judge is the one turning all the wheels. He's the one that possesses the authority and the power to harness the police force. Then we got the thrashing machine sitting there, and that's turning and it's all stoked up, it's running. The belt's running it. These are the judges sitting up there. And these racks come along there, and now they got the public defenders. They're the ones that pick up the 3-tine pitchfork, you know, the 3 tines, and they pick up the bundles, which is you. And they set them in the apron for the thrashing machine. And they set them heads first so that they'll get the cylinder of the airplane, or of the thrashing machine will get the heads first. That's where the money is. That's where the value is. And they got the knives there that'll cut the twine, you know. And be sure you're spread out so that you get the teeth of the cylinder, which come through whisk and separate you right there from your substance. After that, there's wind that blows. And that separates the chaff from the substance. That cleans up the little bit of your substance that's left, a little bit of your rights that's left, gets you through this process. And out this big spout in the back is where you end up going. Right into the pile. Chaff and straw is you. You've now been separated from your substance. And where does your substance go? It goes by way of the dog and pony show known as gravity. Down. It's the substance. And that gets elevated into the truck. Now, you can find no finer example of that in America today that coincides with the justice system. There'll be court officers in the courtroom that are there to provide security. That's the man standing on top of the thrashing machine, being sure that ain't nothing getting away here, that we got security, that everything's turning, and you're the one divested of your substance. Good name, reputation, money, property, family. That even happens. Even lose family. So you're a nothing into the pile. Well, some of that straw is taken, and put under the horses and the cows and so on and so forth to be shit on. So when you get to go through the rest of the process. Now, if you run the legal process all the way through trial, and you come to the day of sentencing. Now, sentencing is the judgment. And the judge says, you're this, that, and the other thing. And you're to serve this, that, and the other. And you are to have probation, and you're to have a fine. And that's real nice, Well, gee, your defense has barely started by the time you get to that stage. And most people think it's over with. Yeah. There are more post-trial remedies than there are pre-trial remedies. There's habeas corpus on about every stitch of the thing. They're on out. And I've seen some very fabulous habeas corpuses. Even to the point where a man is freed from not knowing what day he's going to be done with his sentence. And the system not being able to tell him because the sentencing is screwed up. So that a person of average intelligence, reasonable intelligence, can't determine what day he's going to leave. Well, he's denied due process then. Any denial of due process can be taken care of on a habeas corpus. A lot of that. But there's some simpler stuff than habeas corpus. I get a big kick out of what is called a Rule 35. Under the criminal rules. I mean, you got the books here, and I got the one from Minnesota there. It's under 2705. North Dakota, it's under 35, A and B. And under the federal, it's Rule 35. And all of these state rules, by the way, they all came, and they even cite in the annotations that they came from the federal rule of criminal procedure, Rule 35. But basically what it discloses is this, and this is so important to people. So terribly important. I mean, I want you to know this now. That a judge can issue a fine from the bench, and he can issue probation order from the bench. But he loses jurisdiction after 120 days of the judgment. You might call it the sentence. The sentencing hearing. Yeah. He loses jurisdiction. Well, gee, if you got to spend more than 120 days in the clink, then how does that affect fines and probation? Well, in my personal opinion, they don't exist unless pick up the pen and sign a probation contract, wherein you agree to pay all the fines, penalties, comply with all of the laws. Oh yeah. So what carries on after that? Your contract. And it'd be your contract that'd be violated by a court services person. Oh my goodness. Why would you want to sign a contract wherein you'd have to pay money you probably ain't got? Wherein you would set yourself up so that some court services person could say, he don't deserve to be free, put him away, judge. And take this contract and haul it right in, put it in front of the judge, whether it be state or federal, and say, they got this man here under show cause, have him show cause as to why he should not be found in violation of this contract. Now you got to prove yourself innocent. Well, that's tougher to do. And it can be for anything. And I get a kick out of the court services personnel, and I'd like to talk to you about just one minute. I mean, I call her Eerie. She's a lady. She always violates everybody. I mean, that's the rule. That's her history. She violates everybody. And guess who I get the luck of the draw of? Eerie, baby. She's just a little gal. Donna Eerie is her name, and she doesn't want to use her married name. Well, I'm not so sure her husband wants her to use it either. But his name is Mr. Keith Reisenauer, so her name should be Mrs. Keith Reisenauer. Well, Mr. Keith Reisenauer is a assistant U.S. attorney, and she happens to work for federal court services. How convenient, husband and wife, prosecutor, and up front, prosecutor after the fact, on the pursuant to the contract. And so, anticipating that that's the way the system would operate in Fargo, I went through the whole federal system without doing this one time. So I can tell you from experience, it absolutely can be done. Now, and I had an excuse whenever they wanted me to sign something, pursuant to legal advice. I can't sign any contract unless legal counsel sees it and approves of it. Well, when they want all these signatures, they're not going to dilly-dally and wait around for some counsel, mail it out to them and have them read it and have them make recommendations of one thing and another and so on and so forth. When they can't get the signature right now, they don't want it. They'll try later on something else. Especially when the government wants to appoint you a public defender and you don't want him and you can't do anything about getting rid of him or anything of that nature. You can't finally get him out because the judge won't let him get out. You got him. Well, guess who always gets to tell me exactly what legal advice I should have? He does. I don't sign nothing. And through the whole system. You know, there's a day of reckoning when you can get out to the street, and of course when you don't sign nothing, you know, they got to have your signature because you're an inmate. They got to have your signature so that they can dun the taxpayers for your keep. Did you know that? Remember, those are all taxpayers' money. Those are all trust funds. They're not trusted. They're just the management of the facility. They can't be trusted to handle the funds, so they got to have the inmate signature. Well, you know what happens when they don't get one inmate signature? I can tell you exactly what happened. The last day of the second quarter that I was there wasn't enough money to put breakfast cereal on the table. And so they had to circulate the cup from the workers to be able to go downtown to the grocery store and buy breakfast cereal for the last day of the quarter. In other words, it eventually comes out in the wash. They run out of money. They can't draw the taxpayer funds without your cotton picking signature. And you're supposed to be the bad person locked up. And you're the only ones that the taxpayers trust to allow the funds to be released. Don't you think that's just a little ass backwards? But that's the way it is. Anyway, my job while I was there, to be as nice a fellow as I could, follow the rules as best I could, and do whatever I could to get to the street. Because a superintendent or a warden, when they don't want you there, you'll be on the street. Yeah. And of course they had to take a look real quick to see how come they ran out of money, because that hadn't happened before. And they discovered there was one SOB that wasn't signing nothing. So one day, it wasn't quite without my knowledge, because they have inmates do the books and stuff like that, you know, and you kind of know what's going on. And they decided that we're going to expel this turkey. And so they come and they put a cart under my stuff and roll me to the street corner. And they said, well, now, Mr. B, if you come back onto this property, we're going to charge you criminally with trespass. Well, they could have saved the words. It was a waste of the taxpayers' money. I had no intention of coming back. I slid their cart underneath out of my box of stuff, and it's gone. Well, I want you to know that there's operation of the law as it exists within the law itself, and then there is the physical aspect of the law. In other words, there's the part of doing. Whenever you're released from a facility, you're supposed to turn yourself in to a court services personnel within 72 hours. And of course, they always assume there's a contract for that, you know. They always assume, because certainly they either got the contract within the first 120 days, or they must have got the contract signed before they let you go. You don't have to be signed nothing to be let go. I mean, you just don't. So I walks into Urfy's office within 72 hours. Now, you see, I'm playing on the physical aspect of the law. I got my shades on. And, of course, she recognizes me with my shades on. I'm rather rotund, you know. And she said, Ron, take off your sunglasses. And I said, you better show me what authorizes you to be over me. Well, the court authorized me. Well, now the court lost jurisdiction after 120 days off the sentence. Now, who did you say authorized you? Court, take off your sunglasses. I said, ma'am, produce me the contract that authorizes you to tell me what to do. She grabs the file and she's digging through it. And then she grabs another file and she's digging through it. And she figures, well, it ain't there. Yeah. What would that have been? The probation contract. No God. Well, when she realizes she can't come up with what she's got to have, she throws me a form. It's called a monthly report form. And you see, anytime they've got something prepared, remember it's for their benefit, not yours. Got me? And you know, down at the bottom of that form, it's got the 1001 trap. That's where under penalties of perjury, you know. And man, it's 5 years and $250,000 fine if you sign this and it ain't the true information. Well, I took a look at the form right up at the top. And I said, I want to see the OMB number on that form, and I looked at it, there ain't none. There must be an Office of Management and Budget number. There must be an inception date and an expiration date on that form, or you're not required as a citizen of the United States of America to fill that form out. So that's one protection you got. I always go for the number and say, hold it, this is a bootleg form. Well, we just fill it out anyway. So the operation of law is, take a look at the form. I want to tell you, there wasn't one single question on that one-page form that anybody on the face of this earth could answer correctly. That's why it didn't have an OMB number. It's a stacked deck. Anybody that fills that out and signs it, that's the tool they can use right there to prove you made a false representation. Because you can't answer the questions correctly, because they're tailored so you can't. So I filled out this form, you know, I'm keeping the charade going here. So I filled out the form, just one form, you know, as nebulous as anybody can, and I never signed it. And then I made 12 copies of it, just so I'd have one to send in every month. It's the same. It's the same. They called me in and said, you're not signing these forms. I said, well, you know, the warden of the facility told us, you know, got us all together and told us. Now, I'm here, you know, you're going to be, some of you are going to be leaving here in not too distant future, and I want you to know that if you're going to stay out of trouble out of there, number one, don't have anything to do with any law enforcement officials. Nothing whatsoever. Now, can you all understand that? Well, everybody's kind of in agreement with that. And number two, don't sign any government contracts under any circumstance. Otherwise, you're going to be back here. You see, there are a few wardens or superintendents, as some of them are called if they don't have enough prisoners, that will give you a few words of wisdom when you're about to depart that are worth taking, because they're given based on experience. So don't do that. So I don't enter into any contracts with the government. It's trouble. Because as soon as you enter one of those contracts, you pick up another whole set of statutes you're responsible under. And it's another one of these damn forms, equivalent thereof, where there's no way you can do stuff absolutely right, and they can end up coming after you under that contract at any time. And of course they do. Thus we get a lot of repeat business back into the establishments. So what I'm trying to convey here is that most citizens do themselves in by wanting to cooperate and comply with officials' demands. So I'll clarify it. If they got the contract, if they got the form, you keep your signature off it, because you are going to be waiving some of your most precious constitutional rights. And I tell people, you know, you can only waive so many before you don't have any rights left, and you are restricted of liberty. Yeah. Do you know, for them to even stick a needle in your arm and draw blood to see if you're contaminated with some foreign disease, they gotta have your written permission? I don't give a darn whether they get an ounce of my blood. I mean, I don't care. I ain't gonna sign the document letting them take it. Well, there's penalties for that, you know. Like 10 days in the hole. Now, I'm telling you, you ain't ever lived if you haven't been 10 days in the hole. Because it'll give you an appreciation of liberty like you ain't never had before. You can't tell when it's night or when it's day, except for one thing. You can feel the cement or the steel and tell when there's increased vibration. That will be cars going by. That would be people moving around. So. But it also gives you a chance to absolutely think. Now remember, I managed to get there without signing nothing, without committing a crime, and without being charged with a criminal offense. In other words, the statute wasn't criminal, nor was there an indictment, even though there was a document that said indictment, because I'd never been able to get the jinx material to prove that there ever was an indictment. Okay? But you can end up in the hole, standing up for your rights. That's nothing to be afraid of. I've been there. And you know what happened? After 10 days, I was put right back up there with the rest of them. But I had time to think as to what could I do in this facility to increase the likelihood that I wouldn't be there so long, and that others that had no business being there would be able to get out of there. Because you see, once you're incarcerated, you can help others legally, as long as you don't charge a fee for it in the prison. You can help others. Just between that time and I got carted to the property line, 22 got out. And they only wrote 2 little paragraph letters to the clerk of the district court. Yeah. That really happened. That simple. Some of the smartest people. 20 of them had absolutely not committed a crime. 2 of them were dishonest. Were, in my opinion, criminals. But I'll tell you what, even if you committed a crime and you're a criminal, you have a right to due process of law. And when it's a felony nature, there had better be an indictment there. And of course, in these cases, there wasn't. So even a nasty person has no obligation to sit in the penitentiary unless he has been prosecuted lawfully. I didn't write this book, but I sure like it. It was required that they be indicted. Read the 5th Amendment. They wrote 1 letter to the clerk of court asking for a grand jury transcript, please. Wrote back right away and said there wasn't one. And the second letter was written on the Brady Act. It was, please produce me a copy of the grand jury concurrence form signed by at least 12 grand jurors voting to indict. 2 days. That's all it took to get the mail there. Then it took 2 days to do the paperwork, and they is on the street. Now I want to take you back to Rule 35, because you'll find this to be, you could use this a lot in state facilities. A lot of the time, judges will over-sentence to create a continuing front of public fear. They want you all to be afraid of the government. That way they got control. When you got you afraid, they got you so upon their demand, you will pick up the pen and you will start waiving your rights one at a time. All the way through. They want to be sure that you're scared. There's nothing to be afraid of but fear itself. So don't pay no attention to it. This is it. You know, your rights are it. You got to stand up for them. It ain't pretty seen all the time. But I'll tell you one thing. I didn't feel bad about being where I was because I hadn't committed a crime. And I was not processed lawfully in it. And they trick. They trick lots of people. They're good at doing the dog and pony show to trick people. That's their craft. And they had people to back it up that made false affidavits. Well, what's new, you know? Well, they were there and they're in the record. So no indictment and no criminal section of the law charged. But that doesn't mean you don't end up in the can. The way I managed to gain my liberty was by helping others get theirs. And seeing to it they couldn't draw money from you, the taxpayers, for my keep. I mean, a number of goodies that you can pick up on. I never even did a habeas corpus until just a few days before I figured they'd be kicked out. And I followed that up with a beautiful brief on exactly what the system had done and give it to a world court judge who hand-carried it to the federal courthouse here in Fargo. They changed that policy somewhat. They don't do that so much no more. So, you know. But I am fortunate. I got a chance to go through that process. I got a chance to go to the very deepest hole of it. And while I was there, I figured out of things that I might try to help others. Because I was in the environment where I could, if I ever got out of that hole. And that happened. And it works. You can honestly look in the mirror and talk to yourself and say, I now believe that they don't prosecute anyone completely lawfully. And I'll tell you what, you'll be right. It's your job to see to it where they don't. How else are we going to get them on track to prosecute lawfully if we don't inflict the pain and suffering on them for doing it unlawfully? It's our job. This is our country. So I said, we've got exactly what they had in 1774 right now, except for it ain't the British government. We've got the city, the county, the state, and the federal government that replaced the British Parliament. Now, judges who before held estates at will in their offices, tell me now who's paying the judges. We got a judge down here, Tom Davies. He doesn't even take an oath of office. He operates a court of no record in Fargo, North Dakota. What did I say? You were absolutely entitled to a record, pursuant to your most famous document. No oath of office, a court of no record. Wow, that's a scam and a half. And they collect millions every year from people who just, I'll just pay. I'll just pay. I wished everyone would be in a position one time in their life where they had absolutely no money to pay with. Well, how do you protect yourself then? Assert your rights. Money is the root of all evil, and if you start giving it to them, you're fixing to spend a life where they're going to be tapping you on the shoulder from time to time. Don't do that. Justice is not about money. Justice is about standing up, asserting those rights, and waive them for no man. Yeah. You know, there's so much that I can say about the justice system. You know, but I'll try to capsule it a little bit. How much time you got, Randy? We have a system here that's predominantly structured and used to raise a revenue. It's to get it from you. Very little of the money is spent prosecuting real criminals. We have a lot of real criminals on the streets and in businesses, and in the judicial system and in law enforcement. Big time criminals. Little, if any, time is ever spent on prosecuting that. The government wins the most in the court. That's why they're structured that way. The government is paying the judges. Doesn't make any difference whether it's the crown paying them or the city, the county, the state, or the federal government. You ain't paying them. Now, what do you think they're going to do? They're going to be predominantly partial to the institution that's writing them the check. That's human nature. And if they pull off a bad one anywhere along that structure, all will try to cover for it. Until somebody turns on the light. You know, an old saying, an old buddy of mine said, "Ron, you got a problem. They haven't seen the light yet." The light? What do you mean, the light? He said, you've got to find a way to turn the spotlight on them. Then they see the light. And you know, when you turn the spotlight on one of those criminals that are running around with a badge, do you know that the rest of them are so bad that they start separating themselves from the one? They don't want themselves investigated. They separate themselves, and I'll tell you what, this government's very cannibalistic. It'll eat its young. Your job to turn the spotlight on the criminal, the real criminal that's subverting this. So get your lights ready. You can use this, remember, if you prepare it. And you can turn on a lot of light with this. Sometimes you can do it by being equipped with a real nice tape recorder there. Sometimes you can do it by having a button camera on right there. I mean, I saw a tape not too long ago that puts the Rodney King tape to shame. We even got voice in this one. Kind of a classic, huh? Please don't take straight up what you're told. That includes this. You get so that you know what the truth is. And then it's easy to figure out who's bullshitting you. It's easy to avoid these traps. Yeah. And I'll tell you what, I can assure you one thing. You get hip in the law because that's respect for the law. If you don't know what it is, you don't have any respect for it. Law enforcement officers is a misnomer. They can't enforce what they don't know anything about. And they are the dumbest people in the law I have ever found, and they don't care to learn. Money is good the way it is. Our recruiting is not for good officials. Our recruiting is done for officials that'll go out and do anything they're told to do, regardless of this contract. And we got to turn that around. You know, when I was in school, I was told how bad the Russians were. and that they had a system of justice over there, that they would pluck somebody right off the street without probable cause, run him through it, and he'd be in Siberia. Now, I got that right out of the state-sponsored schools, that they is bad. You know, they may have been. They may still be. But I'll tell you what, that's exactly the system we got. And I didn't learn that in school. I had a lot of unlearning to do before I picked up on what really was out here, because all of my perceptions got in my way. Yeah. Yeah, they got in my way. There's another perception that I got, that I was taught, and that was they knew what the law was. Ah! And don't expect any agency to know its rules and its procedures and its policies or the law. Don't ever assume that, because you're wasting your thoughts. You got to teach them what the program is and the rules are. And if you're picking the program up from them, you're going to miss a lot of things, including entitlement programs that you could have to save yourself, your business, your farm, your home during tough economic times. You got to teach the officials. And when you get to the bigger towns, it's worse yet. I mean, I thought we had a bad system. Yeah, you know where there's a worse one? New York. Just go there. That's a big town now. They got to have the worst in the country. They don't even bother to keep a court file in order in New York. They don't care. They rule 100% of the time for the government, regardless of the circumstances. And people are just used to going along with it. It's a shame. I didn't think anybody had a worse system in this country than we had. Well, yeah, there is. If you go there and saw it, you wouldn't believe. You'd say, my goodness gracious, you know. I come back here thinking our system wasn't all that bad, that we could snub them up, you know, to the law. We got, you know, judges here at Racetrack and Cynthia Rothy, and we got Dawson, and we got Backtrack Bacchus and Sidetrack Leclerc. We got Flaky McGuire over there. I mean, I got to be in the can with the man that delivered the drugs to the judge. He ain't been prosecuted. I mean, the judge ain't been prosecuted yet. Who's there to prosecute him? Nobody but you. We got a judge in this district. It's required by law to spend 50% of the time in this district. You know what I mean by time? That means 12 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year in the district, and spends less than 20% of the time. Now, out of trust, out of contract, violated the law. Who's going to prosecute? I know somebody that will. You see, start turning the light on. You'll find no one on the other side is complying with all of the law. See, you got the upper hand. You're still the boss. They had to take this oath and take it timely. Man, it's our country. Those are our employees. It's our job to manage them. Boy, I'll tell you, they'll make hamburger out of you if you don't stand up. And you may get hamburgered some anyway, but it'll be far less than the person that doesn't put up a defense and doesn't stand on his rights and signs away his rights. He'll spend more time. And you can get to a point where you're deemed to be untouchable because you know the process. And no longer will they be able to generate a revenue off of you. No longer will they be able to steal from you. You know, I wish you the best. I want you to take this tape and the information on it for what it was intended. was intended for you to live free and to be without fear. Your job to uphold this contract absolutely and in all cases. It's your job to see to it that you get justice. You cannot transfer that responsibility to someone else and expect to get justice, because it isn't gonna happen. Got that? I'm as sincere as I can be. Now, our Father who art in heaven wrote all the basic law down, or had it written down, so that we could follow it. I have found nowhere in all of my travels, and I got some years on me now, where I found any way to violate those natural laws. Your obligation is to stand up for them, and this is our simplest form of them. I wish you the best, and God bless you.